Have you ever wondered why the biggest decisions affecting your life were made before you even knew you had a say? Someone's steering, you're just following. What if power never lived where you thought it did? There's a game running right now, not in news headlines, not in televised debates, not in the passionate speeches of leaders you think hold authority. The real game happens in rooms without cameras, in conversations nobody records, between people whose names you barely recognize. And these people don't need to shout, they just need to exist. Think about it. How many times have you felt something was off? An economic policy appearing out of nowhere, a narrative everyone suddenly repeats simultaneously, a technology spreading too fast to be organic. You weren't wrong. There's an invisible architecture shaping what you call reality, and it was designed so you wouldn't notice. Visible power is performance. Presidents, CEOs, celebrities, they all occupy the stage. But who controls the curtains? Who selects the script? Who decides which scene you'll watch? The shadow elite doesn't govern nations. It governs perceptions, and perception is the root of every decision you think you made alone. Historically, this isn't new. Influence structures have existed since complex societies emerged. What changed is the sophistication. Today, control doesn't need to be brutal. It just needs to be subtle. A narrative here, funding there, a closed conference, a philanthropic foundation, a think tank, a strategic consultancy, everything connected, everything orchestrated. And you're in the middle of it. Your choices, your fears, your hopes, everything has been mapped, not out of malice, but because whoever understands human patterns controls flows, controls markets, controls movements, controls the future. And the scariest part, you don't even feel the weight of the chains. Do you really believe your convictions are your own? If this pulls at something inside you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. How do they move without leaving traces? Strength isn't in appearing, it's in shaping without being seen. That's the first law they've mastered. Never fully reveal your hand, because once you know who has power, that power is already diluted. The true elite doesn't want spotlights. It wants permanent influence. Families spanning generations, organizations that answer to no governments, groups funding ideas before they become legislation. They don't need official positions. They have something better. Access. Access to decision makers. Access to financiers. Access to those who shape public opinion before it becomes public. It's an invisible network, but deeply efficient. And their method is elegant. They don't impose. They suggest. Academic research funded here. An international event. There, a study group bringing world leaders together at an isolated resort. Nothing official, nothing directly traceable, but the ideas discussed in these gatherings appear months later in government documents, in public policies, in economic reforms. Coincidence or design? Media is another fundamental piece. It's not about controlling every outlet. It's about controlling the dominant narrative. When you define which questions get asked, you control the answers. When you define what's urgent, you control the agenda. And this doesn't need to be explicit. Just fund the right institutions. Just have the right experts in key positions. Just ensure certain voices get amplified while others get ignored. There's more. Strategic philanthropy. Billions invested in noble causes. Education, health, sustainability. But who decides how these resources get applied? Who defines the criteria? Who chooses which problems deserve attention? Goodness can be used as leverage, and frequently is. The most impressive part. All of this works because nobody believes it works. The best way to hide something is to make it seem impossible to hide. Drop a comment if this has ever made sense to you at some point. Why were you never taught to see this? The education system prepared you for many things, but not for recognizing structural manipulation. That's not a failure. It's by design, because a population that sees the strings is harder to guide, and guiding masses is more efficient than suppressing them. Always has been. Think about how many years you spent studying mathematics, sciences, history, but at no point were you taught to identify patterns of real influence. Nobody explained how narratives get constructed before reaching you. Nobody showed you that institutions you trust might have interests beyond what they publicly declare. This wasn't oversight. It was selection. The shadow elite doesn't need elaborate conspiracies. It just needs information asymmetry. While you're busy reacting to what appears on the surface, real decisions are being made in layers you don't even know exist. And this affects everything: the economy you navigate, the laws you follow, the technologies you use, even the cultural values you absorb without questioning. Throughout history, whoever had access to restricted knowledge had strategic advantage. Forbidden texts, secret societies, knowledge transmitted only among few. Today, information is more accessible than ever. But the ability to interpret that information, that remains restricted. Because data without context isn't power. It's just noise. And then you have a paradox. We live in the information age, yet most people are less informed about the real mechanisms of power than they've ever been. Because the information that matters is buried under layers of distraction, entertainment, manufactured controversies, orchestrated crises to divert attention from what actually matters. You were trained to respond, not to analyze. And that's not an accident. It's a strategic advantage for those who need you to stay exactly where you are. If this content is helping you, hit that like button. It helps the channel keep going. What if you could see beyond the veil? Recognizing the game doesn't mean you've lost. It means you can start playing consciously. Most people live in reactive mode. Someone sets the agenda, and they respond. Someone builds the narrative, and they accept it. Someone offers the solution, and they buy it. But what if you stopped reacting? True strength lies in silent observation. Stoicism applied to the modern world isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about not letting emotions control you. When you understand that many of your reactions were programmed, you gain something rare: real choice. And choice is the beginning of any genuine form of personal power. Watch the patterns. Every time something important is about to happen, public attention gets diverted. Every time a dominant narrative starts getting questioned, a new crisis emerges. Every time hidden power needs to advance an agenda, it uses fear or hope as leverage. Fear of losing something, hope of gaining something. Always emotion, never cold logic. And here's the part few notice. You don't need to fight the entire system. You just need to stop feeding it with your uncontrolled attention, your anxiety, your need for external validation, your dependence on ready-made narratives. Because the shadow elite depends on something: your predictability. If you become unpredictable to their patterns, you become harder to manipulate. Discipline is freedom. When you control your reactions, you control your direction. When you filter what you consume, you protect your mind. When you question everything, including your own certainties, you become less vulnerable. And that's power nobody can take from you. The invisible architecture is still there, but now you know it exists. And knowledge without action is just entertainment. So what do you do with this? How do those who see take real control? Transformation begins when you accept a brutal truth. You were a piece on the board, but pieces can move. And some pieces, when well positioned, change the entire game. The shadow elite counts on passivity, counts on distraction, counts on conformity. What it doesn't expect is someone who observes, analyzes, and acts outside the script. Practical action. Start tracking your own emotional reactions. For 1 week, whenever you feel anger, fear, or urgency while consuming news or social media, stop. Ask yourself, who benefits from this reaction of mine? What decision am I being led to make in this emotional state? This simple pause breaks the cycle, and breaking cycles is the foundation of all real power. Authority doesn't come from shouting. It comes from not needing to shout. Respect doesn't come from demanding. It comes from being someone who can't be easily moved. Influence doesn't come from convincing millions. It comes from being solid enough that a few pay real attention to what you do. Because quality of attention is worth more than quantity. And what about the shadow elite? It keeps operating. It always will. But now, you know it exists. You know how it acts. You know it depends on your unconsciousness. And consciousness, once awakened, never fully goes back to sleep. It can be suppressed, but never erased. You're still in the same world, but you're no longer blind. And that changes everything. Because when you see the strings, you can choose which ones to pull, or which to cut, or simply where not to step. And that choice, however small it seems, is the difference between living a life designed by others or building an existence that truly belongs to you. Absolute power was never about controlling everything. It was about not being controlled. And that was always within your reach. The question is, are you willing to pay the price of lucidity? If this video opened your mind, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next content. Comment below, which part hit you the hardest?